Stream team. The recording, don't worry. I'm the client marketing specialist, and I work with everything related to marketing with all the clients we have around the world. And I'm really excited to be here and to hear this presentation.
Awesome, thanks, Mar. I'm just gonna kind of pick people off of my screen. Karen, I see you're also excited and smiling to be here, so I'd love to get an intro from you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Sipple. I'm the co-founder and managing director of the African Women Entrepreneurship Cooperative. I'm really excited about this session because we are really looking a lot more at partnerships and how to increase not just our own impact, but the impact of other organizations. So I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Awesome. Welcome, Karen. What time zone are you in right now?
I'm on the East Coast, so it's only 5 p.m.
Okay, because when you said it, yeah, I automatically thought you'd be.
We're all virtual, which is good in these times also, but we've always been a virtual program. So I generally operate on various African time zones, but this is late. This is late for African time zones, yes. But I'm in DC.
Got it. Okay, amazing. Well, welcome, Karen. And I see Dan, you just popped up into my screen. Dan, welcome. We're just doing a quick round of introductions of the room because we have a smaller, intimate group. And I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but love a quick introduction of yourself.
Thank you, Luan. Very nice to meet you all. I'm sorry that I missed the introduction of several of you. Hopefully I'll catch up later on. But I am a funding strategist at Jenica Sen Consulting. What we do is that we help mission-driven businesses raise capital on their own terms. That is kind of like what makes us special. Like we really try to make deals on the terms of the entrepreneurs. Very nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Welcome. Anna, over to you.
Hi there. My computer's been really weird, so I'm not going to turn it on because I think my connection will get weird, but
all good.
Thanks for doing this talk. I'm here as an entrepreneur. I'm part of a cooperative software company, and we're building tools to help teams work more effectively in a decentralized way. So I'm really curious about how to do that, and I'm excited to hear from you all.
Amazing. Thank you, Anna. And Sarah, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm the program catalyst for communers.org. So excited to be here and be in this session with Spring. They're one of our members as part of our communers.org membership community. And we are a global membership community for purpose-first conveners to provide a space for them to collaborate, network, and engage with one another throughout the year. And then we also run events like this one, Accelerating the Accelerator. So happy to be here and see you all.
Thank you, Sarah. Sterling, and then over to Sarah, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right, Rigaud?
Almost.
Right?
Sarah Riggett.
Oh, Riggett, okay, got it, thank you.
No worries. Yeah, I'm based in Guatemala. I'm a friend of Sarah Sterling, very complicated with the same name. She invited me to come along, but I'm starting a social enterprise in Guatemala to support grassroots initiatives, and collaborating is going to be a big part of it. So I'm really interested to hear what you've got to say. So thank you.
Amazing. Welcome, Sarah. Yeah, you probably do get mixed up all the time. Awesome. And Veronica, you joined us in the room. Veronica, over to you.
Hello, hi, my name is Veronica. I'm program manager at Spring Activator. Nice to meet you all. I'm connected from Barcelona. So greetings to you all. I see that here we have a global presence. Nice to meet you all, and so exciting to get to know you all and share the content and the presentation.
Thanks, Veronica. And then our team, myself, Jerry, and Nadia will do some formal introductions a little bit later, but maybe what I can do is just pass over the floor to Jerry and she can get us rolling.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, everyone, for introducing yourselves. I love that we have an intimate group here because it's just kind of fun that way that we get to all hear everything. But thanks for joining us today for Collaboration 101, how to optimize working together in a world desperate to heal, which is a mouthful, but so important. And I'm very excited to get into this topic together because as you all shared, most of us work in the ecosystem from different kind of aspects, but we're here to support entrepreneurs. And so when we're in this ecosystem, it seems that we're always kind of answering this question of how we can work together better. So particularly through this past year, as we take on virtual teams, cross-border partnerships, there are just so many challenges that we continue to address. But on the other side of that, just so many benefits to defining a strategy to do this in a really effective way. So when we can kind of share those cross learnings, I mean, the better for all of us to kind of move our work forward. So on today's agenda, I'll introduce us and why we're here. We'll go through a case study that Luann will share around a project that we worked on recently through Spring. We'll go through a breakout activity. Maybe it'll be a breakout. Maybe we'll just all sit together to share, but then also share a framework for collaboration that might help us kind of continue this conversation past what's shared here into, you know, our actual work and our lives beyond this conference and today. So some housekeeping things, rename yourself if you haven't, and put the organization that you represent would be very helpful. Videos if you can, because we do expect this to be pretty interactive, so we'd love to see you, but if you can't, no worries there. Just another note that we will be sharing the frameworks and materials that you see here, also the recording. So if you haven't shared your contact details with us yet, track one of us down so we make sure you're on that list, and then that way we can also share your contact information with the group. So who are we? So Spring as an organization is here to change the world through innovation. And so when I say the world, I truly mean it. Since 2014, we've been working across the globe, 45 communities plus through that time that we've worked through. And like many of you, we've done work through a couple different pillars. And so with entrepreneurs, we run incubation and acceleration programs, some resilience work over the past year, and then a lot of investment readiness training for those entrepreneurs. In the ecosystem, we help put together strategies and implementation plans to kind of keep that work going in individual communities. And so we work with organizations that way. And then with investors, we offer training through our Impact Investor Challenge and some other initiatives to really get the network going to catalyze impact capital. And so lots of work that we do, and we can't do it without our amazing team, who is also now spread across the world. And so Spring is based in Vancouver, but we now have a small team growing in Toronto and San Francisco, where I'm based. And then you heard from Veronica earlier, who is based in Barcelona. So I mentioned, or I didn't introduce myself actually yet. So I'm Jerry, I'm the business development manager here at Spring. You'll be hearing more from Luann, who's our director of strategy and operations. Luann, do you want to just give your
Nicole's notes? Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, my name is Luann Tolosa. Great to meet all of you on this call today. So I am responsible for a lot of our ecosystem work that we do at Spring here. So a lot of our international program management, managing our cross-functional and cross-border teams. I've worked with Sarah in the past with a lot of our conveners work, and one of the case studies that we're doing or talking about today is actually a project we had done with conveners last year during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm really excited to bring in a lot of that experience today to talk about how we can collaborate effectively together. And then on that note, I guess I should pass it off to Nadia, who's to the right of me as well, to do intro.
Thanks, Luann. Hey everyone, really exciting to be here with you today. As Luann mentioned, and as you can see on the screen, I'm the growth marketing strategist at Spring. And yeah, at Spring, we've had the fortune of scaling in the past one and a half years. So it's just kind of making sure that our programs are scaling as well with the company. Oops, we have someone else joining. And yeah, this topic on collaboration is something that I'm really interested in, and both Luann and Jerry are really experienced in this, and I'm just as interested as you in terms of learning from the both of them. Oh, and also I'll be facilitating the chat, so keep an eye out for that.
Thanks, Nadia. So speaking of the chat, to kind of kick us off, I'd like to start off with just this question and point is just what are the challenges that all of you as individuals or in your organization, what are those challenge pain points are you experiencing when it comes to collaborating with other organizations in the ecosystem, or for one of you, like you're an entrepreneur, like what is kind of the barrier to actually making this happen? If it's early on in the process, or if it's later when the project is already running, where are you finding that you have some hesitation or just a general, like it's hard? What does that challenge look like? So if you want to drop those into the chat, as Nadia said, she'll kind of be collecting those items and we'll come back to it later. I just want to give you some time to really think about that and add your thoughts. Also a great time to add any just general resources of like frameworks, articles that have helped you along that process. We'll be compiling those too as well to share with the whole group after this session, along with the things that we'll discuss here live. So keep that question in mind, and Nadia, if you can copy and paste this into the chat just so they have it. So as you kind of mull that over, here's something to kind of spark that, just our objectives for today. And so first and foremost, definitely want to try to shift this mindset around competition. I think as a lot of us are ESOs in the room, but in general, there's always this mindset of just scarcity in the work that we do, scarcity for resources or projects or just different things in the ecosystem that we think that we have to compete for. But in so many cases, it really is better to work together to kind of grab a lot of those opportunities. So how do we shift that mindset? We'll do some reflecting on what, as organizations, individual organizations, do we bring to the table? What are our strengths and core competencies that really help us collaborate effectively? Like we mentioned earlier, we'd love to hear from you all those best practices and different resources that you use when it comes to virtual convening, to cross-border and cross-functional collaborations, if you've worked with a lot of different types of teams, either internally or with other organizations. And then, of course, like always, we're here to really convene with like-minded individuals. So many of us have very similar missions or mandates and opportunities that we're working towards. How do we kind of keep these conversations going? So we hope at the end of this, we have some more tangible things that you can walk away with, be that connections, but also some of those frameworks that we can kind of continue to chat on in the future. So I'm going to pass it over to Luann. She mentioned that she will be sharing a project that she personally worked on during this past year. And so over to you, Luann.
Great, thank you, Jerry. And I already love the sharing that's happening in the chat. And so those are common comments that we've seen in the last little bit in terms of how we work with ESO. So we're going to dig into that right now. So on your screen, you're seeing a program called Build Back Better. And as we all experienced last year during the first stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was so much uncertainty, there was so much change in the world, and so much change very quickly. And as this world is moving towards varying stages of this back to normal today that we're facing another level or another wave of uncertainty happening again. So some places in the world are going back to normal, whatever that means for them. And then some places in the world that are going back to lockdown. So I was on a call the other day, Vietnam, back to lockdown, Australia, back to lockdown. But then when you look at Vancouver and Toronto in Canada right now, we're seemingly like we're okay with no masks, things like that. So there's a lot of uncertainty that's happening in the world in terms of that. So although it's not the beginning stages of the pandemic, it's kind of the similar feel of what do we do next? So that being said, we are finding ourselves in a way to try to move forward. How do we move forward into that environment as well? So a case study that I want to talk through that really exemplifies what it means to collaborate at a time where the world is desperate to heal is this Build Back Better program. And sorry, I'm just going to open the door because it's really hot in this room. There you go. It's really hot in our room in our co-working space in Vancouver here. I just wanted to let you all know that. So Build Back Better program was a program that we had done together with Spring, Second Muse, Conveners.org, and DFAT, so the Australian Government Department of Foreign Trades and Affairs. And so Build Back Better was an initiative to support ESOs around the world in training in business resiliency and adapting their programs and projects to virtual spaces and the changing demands of our ecosystem. So over the course of 16 weeks, we did virtual training over the course of July to October 2020 with cohorts of 30 ESOs in the Southeast Asia region. And so ESOs were often approached by local communities and networks for inspiration and knowledge during a crisis. And so for us, it was crucial for these leaders to reflect, to refocus, and to reimagine their future to adapt and find resilience. So for them to be supported throughout the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So Jerry, if you could go into the next screen. So what we heard over the course of the program were these three overarching themes that we heard. So the first theme was that desire to stay connected on strategies and opportunities, to continue to learn from each other about different strategies and identify new opportunities to work together. We wanted to have knowledge transfer and learnings together, and we wanted to keep each other updated as well. So for a lot of the ESO leaders that are in this room here, you know that sometimes this journey in an ESO environment can be a lonely journey. So finding other ESOs and other leaders that you can collaborate with and talk to are very much important in keeping that progress together. The second thing that we learned was that we wanted opportunities for other ESOs to collaborate together, whether that was internationally or cross-border as well. So cross-border, what we saw in Build Back Better was Southeast Asia region really wanting to collaborate together within their respective communities. We also wanted to collaborate across different ESOs. So as you know, each ESO kind of has their own specific expertise, and not every ESO has unlimited time, resources, capabilities, and talents. And so being able to collaborate with other ESOs to help build that capacity really was something that we took away from that program of what they wanted to take away together. And then as Ian noted, I think in the chat, what we also saw was that there was opportunities to collaborate together on larger funding opportunities and RFPs. And so over the course of the last 12 months, we've really seen with donors and funders that they're looking for people that want to collaborate together and deploy more capital to people that want to collaborate within regions, within different sectors. And so that was something that we really pulled away from that program as well. And then the third, what we heard as well was removing barriers. So going back to that capacity issue, a lot of the ESOs that we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, there were a lot of changes both on how they did business, how they went virtually. And so as you know, you can't just do everything all by yourself. And so that capacity build was really where those partnerships came into play to make those lives of these ESOs easier, more efficient, and then being able to share those resources and tools and tactics to help each other out throughout that time. So that's what we heard in terms of that program specifically. And what I wanted to do is go back to this earlier question of what is your challenge or pain point when it comes to collaboration with others in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so Jerry, I'm going to pass it back to you to talk about some of those examples in the chat. I see the chats going and adding a couple more things here. So if you wanted to throw that back.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that point that you also flagged from Ian around those overlapping funding sources. So Ian, if you want to come off mute and kind of explain a little bit more about what you mean, when I kind of touched on it, but you might have a different angle, would love to hear from you.
In terms of what I meant, or
oh yeah, yes.
Yeah, so most of the folks that I have had the honor and privilege of dealing with, including several of the wonderful folks at Spring, and in fact, this hasn't come up with Spring, but with a lot of other partners, Keith and I have a little roadshow we do together from time to time. Some of you may have been forced to watch. Sarah, I know, has seen it. We did it in Singapore. Is everybody's happy to share everything they have except for their funders. Because, you know, unless you're one of the independently wealthy set, this is how we pay our rent. And so, and I will admit this, I have a few funders that they want to support things, and I want them to give as much money to my peers as possible once I'm taken care of. And I know I have seen that in other folks. So how do we trust each other with the resource? Because I have shared funders and watched them disappear and give money to the other program. And whether this is good or bad for the field, varied, I think. In one case good, in one case not. But it also meant that I had to go find my rent money somewhere else. And so that, like, I will share all my data, all my best practices, all my how to make the world, like, if you've got intellectual property on this, there's very little that ESOs do that I have ever seen that from a point of view of an IP lawyer actually counts as intellectual property. Like teaching method is murky at best, to quote the guy I asked about it. So So like share that, but like, where do we get our rent money? That's a thing. And so best practices and how you've gotten folks to go in and connect to funders in a way that everybody trusts everybody is something I'm always happy to learn about.
Yeah, super interesting. And kind of going back to the point that Luann made as well, is that a lot of these bigger funders, a lot of the projects that we worked on in just the most recent year, they kind of encourage collaboration, right? So like they make it so you really can't do all of these things by yourself. And so I think that's one way to kind of like really look at this and say like, okay, I mean, we'll go over this a little bit later, but like, what are my true strengths? And note, like, there's so much overlap, like you said, Ian, and kind of what we do as ESOs, but like, what are the things that we actually want to focus on instead of forcing ourselves to really, like do everything when we really don't need to, or maybe we even shouldn't be doing that.
And Ian, I just wanted to jump in as well. So going back to the example for Build Back Better, when we had those 30 ESOs in the Southeast Asia region, a lot of them had never worked together or even been in the same rooms together, because a lot of them initially in the beginning of the program was very much the mindset of you're an ESO, I'm an ESO, we're technically competitors in that end. Over the course of that 16 weeks, by the end of it, we were seeing a lot of people wanting to collaborate, like those 3 learnings that I pulled out. But actually from one of those groups and partnerships came another iteration from another funder. So for those that are familiar, the Scaling Frontiers Lab or Frontiers Lab Asia, we actually got a chunk of funding from a bunch of partners, so not from a bunch of partners, from initiatives that came from that Build Back Better program, where there were partners that, hey, we want to collaborate. We think we can collaborate across these different countries. Let's go find some funding. And that's where FLA really became that next project. So Jerry and I are actually working on that next iteration right now. Specifically for my project, it's a cross-border gender lens investing project that we're doing across Pakistan, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, and of course us in Canada. But that only really came about from that Build Back Better program to show that our mindset from 16 weeks ago is very different. And in order for us to get more reach and more scale in the Southeast Asia region, we need to do this together, because 5 different time zones alone is not manageable in that sense. So
to throw in a little bit, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I was in Singapore for Frontier Incubators, right? Like that's
amazing.
That's where, that's not the first time Keith and I did our little roadshow. We co-taught a version of this class. For those of you who don't know, Keith is a spring person. If DFAC's funding it, nobody cares, right? Sure, if there's a third-party funder, we're all good. We're all happy to come in together on some giant external source of money, even though DFAC's not that giant a source of money. But from the point of view of a lot of these folks, government funding, nobody cares. Sure, we'll go in and share on that. But individuals, right? High net worth individuals, a lot of programs, a lot of ESOs that I know are funded by somebody who thinks this is cool and somebody who realizes that their rich friend thinks this is cool, but they can actually do good work with it. And it's that's more because like DFAT, you can just go, the Australian funder for a lot of the, really, you used the Joe Biden theme? That just seems, yeah. So to me, there's a split when there's the giant funding from a government agency or a foundation that everybody already knows about versus the private funding sources, which are a not insignificant chunk of a lot of this work.
Yeah, for sure.
Particularly in places where the government isn't a funder.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ian, for that. So actually, let's talk about some of these things, because in the chat, we have noticed a couple of comments, and I'm sure a lot of those comments resonate with the rest of you in the room as well. So maybe, Jerry, if we want to move into the breakout, that we can split you up. So there's about 17 people in the room, and then we can probably break out people into four or so breakout rooms. Let's make it 5 actually, so everyone has some time to share appropriately. And Jerry, if you want to get to the next slide.
Sure.
So we'll be breaking you up into groups, and then we want you to go around the room, 3 minutes each, sharing what are some collaborations or what kind of collaborations or partnerships have you been part of during this age of COVID in the last 24 months, both successful and unsuccessful. So thinking about some successful partnerships, so Build Back Better was one successful one that we did at Spring, but I'm sure all of us have both ways that we've tried to do it well and it hasn't gone through, and then have been successful. Thank you, Brett, for joining us. Appreciate it. So I'm going to just open up the breakout rooms. I think if you haven't used breakout rooms before, there's a little pop-up that will show up on your screen. Join breakout, throw that in there. And then if you have any issues, there's a little button at the bottom right-hand corner that says ask for help. And then you can just press that and one of us will jump into your room. So, oh, and Nadia, can you just throw the question into the chat? So, perfect, thank you. And then, yeah, so that chat will stay in your chat box until you go into the breakout room. And then, amazing, we'll see you here in back in 10 minutes. Thank you, Derek.
Hello, hello.
Nope. I'm just gonna hit, there we go. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, it's very interesting because on Zoom you only see from this up. So unless you name it, no one knows, which is kind of cool, kind of not. Well, welcome back, everybody. And what I wanted to do, I would love to, exactly, Sarah. What I'd love to do is kind of hear from each of your rooms. And so I had a chance to kind of jump in and out of some of your breakout rooms, but if anyone wanted to share maybe a couple learnings of what worked, what didn't, and go from there. Any volunteers? Otherwise, I will pick on a name.
I was, hey, can you hear me? Maybe I'm muted. Let's see.
Oh, Michael, we can hear you. We can hear
Oh, okay. All right. All right. I was just sharing how, like, when I first started my company, it was like just at the beginning, I had a couple investors that invested in my company and that it didn't work out. Basically, they wanted my company to be like a personal piggy bank they could draw from. And my company, it was born out of the pandemic. Because like right here at the beginning of the year it was started. So like while it didn't work out, it was kind of like the desperation of the pandemic that kind of triggered me to accept the investment. And while it hasn't worked out and they've pulled out now, I was just sharing that it's like a stepping stone and a journey. And you have to keep fighting, and the resiliency, you have to keep going when you have challenges that come up that may be unexpected.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for sharing that.
I'll go. So I was in a room just with Ian, and I think the two things that I would say that were kind of that we pulled out of kind of a varied conversation that we had quickly was that one, playing a niche part in a partnership was really helpful and beneficial. And another thing was kind of being able to find a partner where you each bring something really valuable to the table that's not in conflict with each other. So if one partner brings funding but doesn't have the expertise to execute, another partner brings the model and the staff to do the day-to-day work, for instance. So making sure that each of those partners has a distinct role and a distinct value to add were some of the things that we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right, and kind of identifying what those niche parts that you can play is it's something that we'll go over in like our next slides. But yeah, it's very important to kind of see. I think this is something that was mentioned in the chat earlier as well, as like how do you complement each other? Like not thinking that it's always like going to be in conflict, but how can you kind of pull on those expertise, even if you're kind of product or your services do overlap. For each individual project, how do you kind of pull at what your true strengths are to kind of collaborate, even if you do kind of work in the same pond to begin with? What do you want to focus on for that specific project?
There's also eavesdropping a little bit because Nadia's right beside me. So maybe someone from Nadia, Dan, and Anna, because I was hearing some good conversation over there as well.
I guess I can try to summarize it if nobody else wants to. I feel like we had really similar points to Karen. I think we've realized that there's a need to identify the intention of the relationship early on in order to be motivated. And that if it's transactional, like even if it's not money, it can be like, you know, various types of kind of mutual benefit, but you know, that makes it easier. And then there's this kind of problem of a trade-off between, you know, being transactional and sort of very hyper-focused on performance and being sort of open-minded and building relationships. And that was kind of a little bit of a question mark of like, you know, how does one think towards a larger picture as well, without, you know, while still being practical. And then the other insight I can be sort of teased out was that a lot of times if I'm working with somebody that's sort of not exactly doing what I'm doing, I'm more likely to find ways we can help each other. But I find when I'm trying to work with someone who's doing exactly what I'm doing, unless we literally form some kind of team where we're just working on the thing together, we probably have really strong differences of opinions about how we want to do it. And sometimes we just have like divergence around the niches, around what specific aspects of the thing we're going to do. And then if that niche is not actually complementary with each other, then it's really hard to work together. So kind of the combination of like finding people that are actually not competing and also could stand to benefit, and then making that clear of why you may want to work together from the start.
And then I'm just going to add to that, Anna, is that we also talked about how there's just a question mark around when there are two or multiple parties involved and there's a shared or a common goal, a common end goal, but then each party or either of the two parties have a different way of how to get there. Then how do you navigate that? You have a shared common goal, but then the disagreement is about how you're going to get there. So that was something interesting that was also talked about.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody. And so I was, during the breakout, I was floating between the breakout rooms, and a lot of the things that you all shared were things that I overheard, similarities in all of the rooms, and I did my best to kind of Coles note it into the chat. But a great way to think about this, and this is a very summarized framework that we've talked about at Spring. So Jerry, if you wanted to slide over to the collaboration framework. And maybe Jerry, if you wanted to take a start in terms of walking it through, and then I can add some color that way. Pass it over back to you.
Sure. And so hearing a lot of what everyone shared here, I mean, there's a lot of pieces of this that maybe we can't change immediately, right? Like our goal here is to really change this mindset around competitiveness, but you know, like where do we start in doing that when you know of all the kind of things that we have to face and going into these collaborations? And so we're providing this framework to really start within your organization. And so the number one point here that we make is to identify your brand and your value proposition. And so I know a lot of you obviously have already done this for the brand aspect of your company. But in this context, you know, like what are you known for in the ecosystem? And, you know, what do people and organizations already come to you for? What are those core competencies, and what does your team do well? And then on the other side of that, really identifying what are your gaps and being really honest about what that looks like, instead of like I think it mentioned in the chat also, is this idea of having like an ego, right? Like kind of dropping that ego and being like,
Where are you going?
and yeah, so dropping that and just being able to really be honest about what those weaker points are and where you can kind of learn and bring another team in. The second point is to map out what those opportunities may be. And so if you're going after specific donors and funders and what their priorities are, what are the trends? But if you're not going after that, you know, what as an organization do you want to do more of regardless of what the funding is out there for? Where and when can you make those connections with people, and what's your own capacity? So kind of filling in and answering those questions will kind of help shape what your next steps are. And then the last point is to define what your collaboration philosophy is. And so what I mean by that is kind of what's manageable for your organization, right? Is it something really casual where you have a list of organizations and you get an idea, you know, an idea of what they do and how they work, and you hit them up whenever an opportunity comes up and you can work together that way? Or is it something that's very formalized where you go after opportunities very actively together in a joint venture or a formalized partnership? What does that actually look like for you? And then that way you can kind of start to communicate to the ecosystem, to a lot of your points of like, you know, what is your niche? What exactly are you trying to do? And you can kind of be really transparent about what the goals are, instead of having to kind of hide your hand and all of this. Once you kind of go through all of these kind of questions, you can go into the ecosystem really confident about what you have to offer and what you're looking for, and just being super transparent about things you can and maybe things you should or can't be doing at the time. Luann, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Jerry, for walking us through. And I think some of these big three components that Jerry has mentioned as well, I think some of you might be familiar with ecosystem mapping or program mapping in terms of identifying the opportunities in your respective ecosystems. In terms of brand value and proposition, like Jerry was saying, at Spring, us personally here, we're an impact-driven organization. So whenever someone thinks impact, they think of Spring as a synonymous name for that. So if they have questions about it, or they need to they have some questions about what that looks like in terms of impact in Canada, typically will come up into the top one or two, I would like to think, one or two parts of that list. Another ESO we were talking to in Latin America, they're known specifically for food. So whenever someone thinks of a food contract, proposal, whatever it is, they will go to that one organization first and foremost. And if they can't help them, they'll go to someone else potentially. So that's where that really getting the ecosystem to really understand what they can go to you for is kind of your very big first step in terms of being that top of the pile or list when a donor, a funder, a high net worth individual really wants to work in that sector or space, and know how to contact you as well. And that last part about what is your collaboration philosophy. So we talked about that a little bit in the chat. So what is that partnership and what are those expectations right from the beginning? So if your definition of collaboration is actually going out to the market and doing joint ventures or partnerships that are one-on-one, great, that's what you go out and look for. Or is your collaboration philosophy actually more of a, hey, how do I help you? So really understanding and defining what your philosophy on what a partnership or collaboration really means to your organization will allow you to find those right people, right organizations that will align with your values, but also align a little bit more with that execution piece, because you can have the same vision, but you can approach it and have different philosophies of how do you solve it. And that then becomes either areas of tension either areas of tension or really areas of strength. So it's how you define that for yourself. Great. So those are kind of the big three questions in terms of the framework. And in terms of what's next, so I think in the last hour, we probably spitballed or probably threw the kitchen sink at you in terms of all these different things of ways we can work together. So actually coming out of the session, we have a couple of takeaways for you, including that framework list. And then Nadia is actually also going to summarize all of those collaboration pain points and everything that you put into a chat into a document you can take away. Because a lot of the things that we're talking about today are going to take some time and some reflection within yourselves, within your organizations, but also making it relevant to your ecosystem and what that looks like. So if your ecosystem is a little bit more nascent and entrepreneurial mindset and ecosystem is a little bit newer to where you are currently operating versus say a mature ecosystem, like I don't know if some of you are in Silicon Valley or for whatever it is, it's going to differ in terms of how you approach that level of collaboration or level of going out to the market and finding out what you can help with as well. And then of course the framework that we have in there, we're also going to put that into a nice little takeaway for you that you can take and reflect on and show to your team and figure out how you want to move forward in next steps. Also, as you can see, there's 13 people in the room. There were 17 people at the start of the session. I think all collectively, we all want to collaborate in some way. You're in this session because of the fact that you're interested in how you do that best for your organization or your ecosystem. So what we'll also do, we'll share this recording, but also if you wanted to connect with any three of us and you wanted to say connect with someone else in the room, we're happy to make those connections and facilitate that for you if you haven't already. And then I believe convener Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, there's also a list of attendees that they can collaborate with or get this contact information from. Okay, perfect. So you have people here in the room already that are already in the mindset of this, let's collaborate, I want to know how. So you have looked to the left and right of your screen, and these are the people that you might want to reach out to first and see what they're looking at, what they're doing, what they want to do more of, and you might find that someone out of this room might be open to doing something with you. So wanted to leave with that. Jerry, back to you.
Yeah, amazing. So the unofficial homework is to keep this conversation going, whether that bring it back to your team and decide how you want to move forward with it, or reach out to someone here if you haven't exchanged that contact information already. It's a great start, and honestly, we'll continue to have this conversation for many years to come, I'm sure, as new challenges come up, but we're excited to kind of be in this journey together. So feel free to reach out to any of us and also connect with Spring and follow our journey, as we'd love to follow all of you on your journey as well, and see kind of how we can all collaborate or share insights in the future.
Any final questions? That hour went by really quickly.
Thank you so much for sharing your time and investment in this event, to the whole team of Spring, and then to all the attendees of this session, and hope to see you at our following sessions for the rest of today and tomorrow.
It's great to meet most of you. I'm sure we'll connect soon.